Have you ever wondered what lurks in the depths of the ocean, waiting to claim unsuspecting souls? What if the most terrifying dangers at sea aren't the storms or the sharks, but the ghosts of those who've perished on the unforgiving waves? Prepare yourself for a chilling tale that will make you think twice about ever setting foot on a ship again. The salt-laden wind whipped across the deck of the Siren's Revenge, carrying with it the acrid stench of rotting seaweed and something far more sinister. First, mate Jacob Hawkins squinted into the impenetrable fog that had enveloped the ship, his weathered hand gripping the ship's wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. "Captain," he called out, his voice barely audible above the creaking of the ship's timbers, "we ought to drop anchor. This fog's thicker than pea soup, and there's something not right about it." From the shadows of the quarterdeck emerged Captain Ezra Blackwood, a towering figure whose very presence seemed to dim what little light penetrated the mist. His face, partially obscured by a wild raven-black beard, was a map of scars and malevolence. A pair of ice-blue eyes, as cold and unforgiving as the Arctic seas, fixed upon Jacob with a gaze that chilled him to his very core. "Mr. Hawkins," the captain's voice rumbled, low and menacing, "are you suggesting that I, Ezra Blackwood, should cower before a bit of mist like some yellow-bellied landlubber?" He took a step closer, and Jacob found himself pressing back against the wheel, desperate to put distance between himself and his captain. "No, sir," Jacob stammered. "I just thought—" "You thought wrong," Blackwood snarled, his breath reeking of rum and decay. "We press on. I'll not let a mere fog stand between me and the treasure that awaits us." As if in response to the captain's defiance, a bone-chilling wail echoed across the waves, causing every man on deck to freeze in terror. It was a sound that didn't belong in this world, a keening cry that spoke of unimaginable suffering and otherworldly horrors. Captain Blackwood's eyes narrowed, a cruel smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Music to my ears, Mr. Hawkins, the siren song of riches beyond our wildest dreams." Jacob's blood ran cold. He'd heard tales of the treasure they sought, an ancient hoard guarded by forces beyond mortal comprehension. But the stories also spoke of the fate that befell those foolish enough to pursue it. Ships vanishing without a trace, entire crews found drifting lifeless in the water, their faces frozen in expressions of utmost terror. "Captain, please," Jacob pleaded, his voice barely above a whisper. "The men are scared. This ain't natural. We should turn back while we still can." Blackwood's hand shot out, grabbing Jacob by the throat with inhuman strength. He lifted the first mate off his feet, bringing their faces inches apart. "Listen well, you snivelling coward," he hissed, his words dripping with venom. "I didn't come this far to turn back now. Any man who even thinks of mutiny will wish for the mercy of the noose when I'm done with him. Do I make myself clear?" Jacob could only manage a weak nod, spots dancing before his eyes as he struggled for breath. Blackwood released him, and he crumpled to the deck, gasping and sputtering. "Now!" the captain roared, turning to address the rest of the crew. "Back to your posts, you dogs! We sail on, come hell or high water!" The men scrambled to obey, terror of their captain momentarily outweighing their fear of the supernatural horrors that seemed to lurk just beyond the veil of fog. As Jacob struggled to his feet, he caught sight of something that made his blood freeze in his veins. For just a moment, the mist had parted, revealing a stretch of open water beside the Siren's Revenge. There, keeping pace with their ship without so much as a ripple to mark its passage, was another vessel. It was an ancient galleon, its timbers blackened and rotting, its sails in tatters, and yet it moved with impossible speed and silence. But it wasn't the ship itself that caused Jacob's heart to nearly stop. It was the crew. Dozens of figures lined the rails of the ghostly vessel, their flesh hanging in decayed strips from yellowed bones. Empty eye sockets stared directly at him, and lipless mouths gaped in silent screams. Jacob opened his mouth to shout a warning, but no sound emerged. He blinked, and in that instant the phantom ship vanished, swallowed once more by the impenetrable fog. "God help us all," he whispered, crossing himself with a trembling hand. As the Siren's Revenge plunged deeper into the mist, the temperature plummeted. Frost began to form on the rigging, and each exhalation from the terrified crew hung in the air like fleeting ghosts. The fog seemed to press in on all sides, a suffocating blanket that muffled all sound save for the pounding of their own hearts. In the eerie silence, whispers began to flit through the air, snatches of conversation that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Jacob strained his ears, trying to make sense of the disembodied voices. Should never have come. Curse upon us all. No escape. "Belay that chatter!" Captain Blackwood's voice cut through the whispers like a cutlass. "The next man I hear spread in fear will be keel-hauled." But even as he spoke, a change came over the captain. His eyes, usually hard as flint, darted nervously from shadow to shadow. His hand strayed constantly to the hilt of his sword, fingers twitching as if eager to draw the blade against some unseen threat. Jacob realized with a start that for the first time since he'd known him, Captain Ezra Blackwood looked afraid. A sudden lurch sent several men sprawling across the deck. The ship groaned and creaked, timbers protesting as if straining against some immense invisible force. "What in the 9 hells?" Blackwood growled, staggering to the rail and peering over the side. Jacob joined him, and what he saw nearly stopped his heart. The sea around them had turned black as pitch, roiling and churning like a pot of boiling tar, and rising from those impossible depths were hands. Scores of pallid, bloated hands reaching up towards the ship with grasping, desperate fingers. "Sweet Jesus," Jacob breathed, stumbling backward. "Captain, we have to—" His words were cut short by an ear-splitting crack. The mainmast shuddered, long fissures spiderwebbing across its surface. Before anyone could react, it toppled with a thunderous crash, crushing several unfortunate souls beneath its weight. Chaos erupted on deck. Men ran in panic, their screams mingling with the otherworldly wails that now seemed to come from the very air around them. Through it all, Captain Blackwood stood like a statue, his eyes fixed on some point in the distance. "Captain!" Jacob shouted, grabbing Blackwood's arm. "We have to abandon ship. She's going down!" Slowly, as if waking from a trance, Blackwood turned to face his first mate. The look in his eyes made Jacob's blood run cold. There was no trace of the brutal, domineering captain he knew. Instead, he saw only a bottomless well of madness and despair. "It's too late, Jacob," Blackwood whispered, his voice hollow. "It was always too late. From the moment we set sail, we were already dead." As if to punctuate his words, a massive tentacle, pale and mottled with patches of bioluminescence, rose from the churning sea. It coiled around the ship's middle with a sickening crunch of splintering wood. The last thing Jacob Hawkins saw before the Siren's Revenge was dragged beneath the waves was Captain Ezra Blackwood's face. The man who had terrorized his crew, who had scoffed in the face of supernatural horrors, was laughing, a high, broken sound that would haunt Jacob for eternity. As the icy black water closed over his head, Jacob's last conscious thought was a fervent wish that death would claim him quickly, for he knew, with a dreadful certainty, that there were far worse fates awaiting them in the lightless depths below. The story of the Siren's revenge and her damned crew might have ended there, lost to the unfathomable abyss of the sea. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. Plans as dark and twisted as the mind of Captain Ezra Blackwood himself. Months passed, and whispers began to circulate through seedy dockside taverns and fishermen's haunts. Tales of a ghostly ship that appeared in the dead of night, its timbers rotting and dripping with seawater, yet somehow staying afloat. Those unfortunate enough to catch sight of her crew spoke of walking corpses, their flesh hanging in strips, faces frozen in eternal screams of agony. And at the helm, they said, stood a figure taller and more terrifying than all the rest, a captain with a wild black beard and eyes that glowed with an unholy blue fire. In life, Ezra Blackwood had been a monster. In death, he had become something far worse. The ghost ship sailed on, leaving a trail of horror and devastation in its wake. Entire coastal villages were found abandoned, their inhabitants vanished without a trace. Ships disappeared in calm seas, only to be discovered weeks later, adrift and empty, save for the lingering stench of decay. Those who studied such phenomena began to notice a pattern. The Siren's revenge, for that was the name whispered in fear by those who had seen her, seemed to be following a specific course. It was as if, even in death, Captain Blackwood was still pursuing his ill-fated quest for treasure. But what treasure could be worth such a terrible, eternal fate? What power had transformed Blackwood and his crew into these undying abominations? And more importantly, could anything stop them? Or was the world doomed to suffer under the curse of the ghost ship and its damned captain for all eternity? As reports of the ghost ship's reign of terror spread, a sense of dread settled over coastal communities like a suffocating fog. Fishermen refused to venture out to sea, trade routes were abandoned, and once bustling ports fell silent. The ocean, once a source of livelihood and adventure, had become a realm of nightmares. It was in this atmosphere of fear that a most unlikely hero emerged. Marina Holloway had always been drawn to the sea, despite, or perhaps because of, the tragedy that had shaped her life. 10 years earlier, her father, renowned marine biologist Dr. Samuel Holloway, had vanished during an expedition to study deep-sea phenomena. The official report claimed his research vessel had been lost in a storm, but Marina had never accepted that explanation. Now, at 28, she had followed in her father's footsteps, earning a reputation as a brilliant and fearless oceanographer. When news of the ghost ship reached her, Marina felt a chill of recognition. The descriptions of the supernatural occurrences surrounding the Siren's revenge were eerily similar to the phenomena her father had been investigating before his disappearance. Determined to uncover the truth, both about the ghost ship and her father's fate, Marina assembled a team of experts: Elias Chen, a skeptical paranormal investigator, Father Miguel Ortiz, an elderly exorcist with a haunted past, and Captain Sarah Blackwood, a hardened naval officer with a personal stake in the mission. "I don't need to tell you how dangerous this expedition will be," Marina addressed her team as they prepared to set sail aboard the research vessel Nautilus. "We're not just dealing with natural forces here. If even half the stories about this ghost ship are true, we're up against something that defies all rational explanation." Elias Chen snorted, adjusting his glasses. "With all due respect, Dr. Holloway, I've investigated hundreds of supposed paranormal phenomena. 99% of the time, there's a perfectly logical explanation." "And the other 1%? Father Ortiz asked quietly, his gnarled hands clutching a worn rosary. Elias's confident demeanour faltered for a moment. "Let's just say I pray we're dealing with the 99% this time," Captain Blackwood, who had been silently studying navigation charts, finally spoke. "My great-great-grandfather was Ezra Blackwood's younger brother," she said, her voice tight with suppressed emotion. "The shame of what Ezra did has haunted our family for generations. If there's even a chance to end this curse, I'm in." Marina nodded, feeling the weight of their mission settle upon her shoulders. "Then let's get underway. Whatever's out there, whatever happened to my father and all those other lost souls, we're going to find answers." As the Nautilus slipped away from the harbour, none of its crew noticed the shadowy figure watching from the docks, nor the flock of albatrosses that took flight, following the ship with an unnatural sense of purpose. For 3 days, the Nautilus sailed through calm seas under clear skies. The mood aboard was tense but optimistic. Marina spent hours poring over her father's old research notes, searching for clues that might help them locate the ghost ship. On the 4th day, everything changed. It started with the instruments. Compasses began to spin wildly, electronic equipment flickered and died, and the ship's engines sputtered to a halt, leaving them adrift in a suddenly empty sea. "What the hell is going on?" Elias demanded, frantically checking and rechecking his array of sophisticated sensors. "It's like we've sailed into some kind of electromagnetic dead zone." Marina felt a chill run down her spine as she recognized the phenomenon from her father's notes. "It's not electromagnetic," she said softly. "It's something else entirely." Before anyone could respond, a bone-chilling shriek cut through the air. The crew rushed to the deck, searching for the source of the unearthly sound. What they saw defied belief. The sea around the Nautilus was no longer empty. As far as the eye could see, the water was filled with pale, twisted forms, human bodies in various states of decay, all reaching towards the ship with grasping hands. "Mother of God," Father Ortiz whispered, crossing himself. Captain Blackwood's face had gone ashen. "It's them," she said, her voice barely audible. "The lost souls. All those ships, all those crews." Marina forced herself to look away from the horrifying spectacle, her scientific mind racing to make sense of what she was seeing. "This has to be some kind of mass hallucination," she muttered, "or maybe a holographic projection." But deep down, she knew. This was real. This was what her father had discovered, what had taken him from her. A thick, unnatural fog began to roll in, obscuring the gruesome scene. As visibility dropped to near zero, the temperature plummeted. Frost formed on the rails and rigging, and each exhalation from the terrified crew hung in the air like fleeting ghosts. "Everyone, get below deck!" Marina shouted, trying to keep her voice steady. "We need to—" Her words were cut short by a deafening crack. A massive fissure split the deck of the Nautilus, and icy black water began to pour in. "Abandon ship!" Captain Blackwood's training kicked in, her voice carrying over the chaos. "To the lifeboats now!" In the frantic scramble that followed, Marina found herself separated from the others. As she fought her way through the thickening fog, a sudden current of icy air knocked her off her feet. She slid across the tilting deck, scrabbling desperately for purchase. Her hand closed around something solid, the ship's rail. Marina pulled herself up, gasping for breath, and found herself face to face with a sight that would haunt her for the rest of her days. Looming out of the fog was the Siren's revenge in all its horrifying glory. The ghost ship's timbers were black with rot, crawling with phosphorescent fungi that gave it an otherworldly glow. Tattered sails hung from its masts like burial shrouds, and a foul miasma of decay wafted from its hold. But it was the crew that struck true terror into Marina's heart. Dozens of corpses in various states of decomposition moved about the deck with jerky, unnatural motions. Their empty eye sockets seemed to fix upon her, lipless mouths gaping in silent screams. And there, At the helm stood a figure that could only be Captain Ezra Blackwood himself. He was a giant of a man, his wild black beard writhing as if alive. But it was his eyes that captivated Marina, twin orbs of blue fire that burned with an unholy light. As she stared, transfixed by the impossible horror before her, Blackwood's gaze locked onto hers. A cruel smile spread across his rotting features, and he raised a hand in a mocking salute. Marina felt something ancient and evil reach out, probing her mind. Blackwood's voice, like the grating of bones in a forgotten tomb, echoed in her thoughts. "Welcome, child of Holloway," the voice rasped. "Your father sends his regards." The shock of those words broke the spell. Marina stumbled backward, her scientific mind reeling as it tried to reconcile what she was seeing with what she knew to be possible. A hand grabbed her arm and she whirled, ready to fight, but it was Elias, his face pale with terror. "We have to go," he shouted over the howling wind. "The ship's breaking apart." Together, they raced for the last remaining lifeboat. Father Ortiz was already aboard, helping Captain Blackwood pull struggling crew members to safety. As they pushed away from the sinking Nautilus, Marina looked back one last time. The Siren's revenge was gone, vanished as if it had never been. But she knew with chilling certainty that this was only the beginning. The lifeboat tossed and turned on the choppy waves as the survivors huddled together, shell-shocked and shivering. The fog began to lift, revealing a calm sea under a star-filled sky, as if the horrors they had just witnessed were nothing but a shared nightmare. What did we just see?" One of the crew members finally broke the silence, his voice trembling. Marina took a deep breath, trying to gather her thoughts. "I don't know," she admitted. "But whatever it was, it has my father, and I'm not going to rest until I find out the truth." Captain Blackwood nodded grimly. "My family's shame," she said. "I always thought it was just a legend, but now—" She trailed off, her eyes haunted. Father Ortiz clutched his rosary, murmuring prayers under his breath. But it was Elias who surprised them all. "I've spent my entire career debunking the supernatural," he said, his voice hoarse. "I've always believed there was a rational explanation for everything, but this—" He shook his head. "This changes everything." As the first light of dawn broke on the horizon, Marina made a silent vow. She would unravel the mystery of the Siren's revenge. She would find out what happened to her father, and somehow, some way, she would put an end to the curse that had claimed so many lives. But little did she know, the ghostly captain had plans of his own. In the depths of his rotting ship, Ezra Blackwood smiled his terrible smile. The game was only just beginning, and he had waited a very long time to play. The rescue came at dawn, a Coast Guard cutter slicing through the calm waters that belied the horrors of the previous night. As Marina and the surviving members of her team were brought aboard, she could see the skepticism in the eyes of their rescuers. Their story of a ghost ship and an undead crew was met with barely concealed disbelief. "We'll need to debrief you all thoroughly once we reach port," the Coast Guard captain said, his tone making it clear he suspected some sort of mass hallucination or hoax. Marina didn't argue. She knew how it sounded. Hell, if she hadn't seen it with her own eyes, lived through that nightmare, she wouldn't have believed it either. As they approached the harbour, Marina pulled Captain Blackwood aside. "We can't let this end here," she said in a low voice. "Whatever's out there, whatever has my father and your ancestor, it's not going to stop." Sarah Blackwood nodded grimly. "I agree. But we lost everything on the Nautilus. All our equipment, our research. Where do we even start?" A hand fell on Marina's shoulder, and she turned to see Father Ortiz, his eyes grave but determined. "We start with faith, my child," he said softly. "Faith and a willingness to confront the darkness that lurks in the depths of both sea and soul." Elias joined them, looking haggard but resolute. "I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'm in too. After what we saw, the world needs to know the truth." Marina felt a surge of gratitude for her unlikely team. "Then it's settled. As soon as we're cleared by the authorities, we begin again. Whatever it takes, we're going to solve this mystery and end Blackwood's curse." Little did they know, their determination had not gone unnoticed. High above, a lone albatross wheeled in the sky, its eyes gleaming with an unnatural intelligence as it observed the returning survivors. In the weeks that followed, Marina and her team worked tirelessly to piece together the puzzle of the Siren's revenge. They scoured historical records, interviewed descendants of long-lost crews, and delved into obscure maritime legends. Their search led them to a remote fishing village on the coast of Nova Scotia. Here, in a mist-shrouded cove, they found an old woman named Agnes McTavish, reputed to be the last living descendant of a sailor who had served under the original Captain Blackwood. Agnes's tiny cottage was a treasure trove of nautical artifacts and faded documents. As she served them tea in chipped china cups, her gnarled hands trembling slightly, she fixed Marina with a penetrating stare. "You've seen it, haven't you?" Agnes asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "The cursed ship, the damned captain." Marina nodded, a chill running down her spine at the old woman's words. Agnes sighed heavily, reaching for an ancient, leather-bound journal. "Then it's time you knew the whole truth, the story of Ezra Blackwood and the terrible power he sought." As Agnes began to read from the journal, the small cottage seemed to fade away. Marina could almost smell the salt air, hear the creaking of timbers and the snap of canvas in the wind. 1745, the South Pacific. Captain Ezra Blackwood stood at the helm of the Siren's Revenge, his eyes fixed on the horizon. They had been at sea for months, following a map that had cost him a fortune in blood and gold. But if the legends were true, the prize would be worth it all. "Land ho!" The cry came from the crow's nest, and Blackwood allowed himself a predatory smile. The island that emerged from the mist was like no place on earth. Jagged black rocks jutted from shores of volcanic sand, and at the centre rose a mountain wreathed in ominous clouds. As they drew closer, an oppressive silence fell over the ship. No birds cried, no insects buzzed. It was as if they had sailed to the very edge of the world. Blackwood assembled a landing party, ignoring the fearful muttering of his crew. They rowed ashore in tense silence, the only sound the soft lapping of waves against the boat. At the foot of the mountain, they found the entrance to a vast cave. Ancient symbols were carved into the rock, glowing faintly with an eldritch light. "This is it, lads," Blackwood growled, his eyes gleaming with avarice. "The Abyss Heart, said to have the power to command the very seas themselves. With it, we'll be kings of the ocean, feared by all who dare to sail." But as they ventured deeper into the cave, a sense of creeping dread began to overtake them. The air grew thick and heavy, reeking of decay and something far worse, something ancient and malevolent. In the heart of the mountain, they found a vast chamber, and there, pulsing with an unholy light, hovered a crystalline object the size of a man's fist. The Abyss Heart. Blackwood reached for it, deaf to the warnings of his men. As his fingers closed around the crystal, a piercing shriek filled the air. The cave began to shake, rocks falling from the ceiling. "Captain, we must leave!" his first mate shouted. But Blackwood stood transfixed, the Abyss Heart pulsing in his grasp. A voice, vast and terrible, echoed in their minds. Foolish mortals, you know not what you have awakened. The sea itself seemed to rise up in fury. As the surviving crew fled to the ship, they watched in horror as titanic tentacles burst from the waves, wrapping around the island and dragging it beneath the surface. Blackwood stood on the deck of the Siren's Revenge, laughing maniacally as the storm raged around them. The abyss heart had fused to his chest, its eldritch light spreading through his veins. "I am the master of the seas now," he roared. "Death itself holds no dominion over me." But his triumph was short-lived. As the ship plunged into a maelstrom of impossible size, Blackwood realized too late the true nature of his bargain. He had gained power beyond imagining, but at the cost of his soul, and the souls of his entire crew. The Siren's Revenge was dragged into the lightless depths, its captain and crew doomed to sail for eternity, haunting the seas as a warning to those who would meddle with forces beyond mortal comprehension. As Agnes's voice faded, Marina found herself back in the present, her heart racing. The tale was fantastic, unbelievable. And yet, after what she had seen, she knew it to be true. "But what does this have to do with my father?" she asked, her voice hoarse. Agnes fixed her with a solemn gaze. "Your father discovered the truth, child. He found evidence of the abyss heart's existence, and he sought to destroy it, to end Blackwood's curse once and for all." A cold knot formed in Marina's stomach. "And Blackwood took him," she whispered. Agnes nodded gravely. "But there's more. The journal speaks of a way to break the curse, a ritual that can free the damned souls and send the Siren's Revenge to its final rest." Elias, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, spoke up. "Let me guess. It's incredibly dangerous and probably suicidal." "Indeed," Agnes replied with a grim smile. "It requires living souls to confront Blackwood on his own ship, at the very spot where he first claimed the abyss heart." Captain Blackwood's face had gone pale. "You mean we have to go back to that island, the one that sank beneath the waves centuries ago?" Father Ortiz crossed himself. "May God have mercy on our souls." Marina stood, her jaw set with determination. "We have to try. For my father, for all the souls Blackwood has claimed, we have to end this." As they left Agnes's cottage, laden with the ancient journal and a sense of grim purpose, none of them noticed the albatross perched on the roof. Its eyes glowed with an eerie blue light as it took wing, flying out to sea with unnatural speed. Miles away, in the depths of his watery domain, Captain Ezra Blackwood smiled his terrible smile. The pieces were falling into place, just as he had foreseen. Soon, very soon, he would have what he truly desired, and the world of the living would tremble before his power. The final confrontation was drawing near, and the fate of both the living and the dead hung in the balance. The preparations for their final confrontation with Captain Blackwood were made in grim silence. Each member of the team knew the stakes and the likely cost of failure. Marina pored over her father's old research notes, cross-referencing them with the information in Agnes McTavish's journal. The ritual to break the curse was complex, requiring specific artifacts and precise timing. "We'll need to perform the ritual at the exact spot where Blackwood claimed the abyss heart," she explained to the others. "But that island sank centuries ago. How are we supposed to find it?" It was Elias who provided the breakthrough. "I've been analyzing the patterns of the ghost ship sightings," he said, spreading a map across the table. "There's a clear epicenter to Blackwood's haunting grounds. I'd bet my life that's where the island used to be." Captain Sarah Blackwood nodded grimly. "Then that's where we'll go. I've called in every favor I have. We'll have a ship waiting for us at dawn." Father Ortiz clutched his rosary, his eyes distant. "I've sent word to the Vatican. They're sending reinforcements." Marina raised an eyebrow. "Reinforcements?" The old priest managed a wan smile. "Let's just say the Church takes the matter of damned souls very seriously." As they made their final preparations, a sense of foreboding settled over the group. They all knew that the chances of surviving this mission were slim, and yet each of them was driven by a purpose greater than themselves, to end a centuries-old curse, to save countless souls, and to confront the darkness that lurked in the depths of the sea. The ship that awaited them at the dock was a far cry from the ill-fated Nautilus. The Redemption, as Sarah had christened her, was a state-of-the-art vessel equipped with the latest in marine technology and, at Father Ortiz's insistence, a small chapel. As they set sail, Marina couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. She scanned the sky, half expecting to see the albatross that had haunted their steps since their first encounter with the Siren's revenge. But the sky remained clear, the sun beating down with deceptive cheerfulness. It was on the third day of their voyage that the storm hit. It came out of nowhere, the sky darkening to an unnatural purple-black in a matter of minutes. Wind howled across the deck, and waves the size of mountains threatened to swallow the ship whole. "This is no natural storm," Elias shouted over the gale, his equipment sparking and short-circuiting around him. Sarah fought with the ship's wheel, her knuckles white with the effort. "He knows we're coming," she growled. "Blackwood's trying to stop us." As if in response to her words, a massive tentacle burst from the churning sea, wrapping around the ship's midsection. The sickening crunch of buckling metal filled the air as the Redemption was squeezed like a tin can. "Everyone topside!" Marina yelled, grabbing what equipment she could. "We need to—" Her words were cut short as the tentacle tightened its grip. With a final agonizing groan, the Redemption split in two. Marina felt herself falling, the icy black water rushing up to meet her. The cold hit her like a physical blow, driving the air from her lungs. As she sank into the depths, a strange calm came over her. Was this how it ended? Had they come so far only to fail at the final hurdle? But then, through the murky darkness, she saw a light. Faint at first, but growing stronger. Marina kicked towards it with the last of her strength. Her head broke the surface, and she gasped for air. As her vision cleared, she realized with a jolt of terror where she was. The Siren's revenge loomed before her, its rotting timbers glowing with that sickly phosphorescence. The ghostly crew lined the rails, their empty eye sockets fixed upon her. And there at the helm stood Captain Ezra Blackwood himself. His wild beard writhed like living shadows, and his eyes burned with that unholy blue fire. When he spoke, his voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Welcome aboard, Marina Holloway," he said, his lipless mouth twisted in a grotesque smile. "We've been expecting you." As if moved by invisible hands, Marina felt herself being lifted from the water, deposited unceremoniously on the deck of the ghost ship. Around her, she saw the rest of her team, Sarah, Elias, Father Ortiz, all in various states of shock and terror. Blackwood descended from the quarterdeck, each step echoing with an authority that went beyond the physical realm. The abyss heart pulsed in his chest, tendrils of its power visibly coursing through his undead form. "Did you really think you could challenge me?" he asked, his tone almost pitying. "I, who have conquered death itself, who command the very seas." Marina struggled to her feet, fighting against the supernatural dread that threatened to overwhelm her. "We've come to end your curse, Blackwood," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "To free all the souls you've damned with your greed." Blackwood threw back his head and laughed, a sound like the screaming of the damned. Foolish child. There is no curse to break. This is power, pure and simple, and soon it will be even greater. With a gesture, he caused the mists to part. Marina gasped as she saw where they were. The Siren's revenge floated above a massive whirlpool, at the centre of which rose the jagged peaks of a barely submerged island. "Behold," Blackwood intoned, "the Isla de la Condenación, the Island of Damnation. For centuries it has gathered the souls of those lost at sea, and now, with the ritual you so helpfully brought to me, I shall claim them all." Marina's blood ran cold as she realized the truth. They hadn't been pursuing Blackwood. He had been leading them here all along. But even as despair threatened to overtake her, Marina felt a familiar presence. She turned to see a spectral figure materializing on the deck. Her father, Doctor Samuel Holloway. "Marina," he said, his voice faint but filled with pride. "You came." Tears sprang to Marina's eyes. "Dad, I'm so sorry. We tried to—" "There's no time," Samuel interrupted. "The ritual. It can still work, but not the way you thought. It was never about destroying the Abyss Heart. It's about choosing its wielder." Understanding dawned on Marina. She looked at her team, at Sarah, descendant of Blackwood's own blood, at Elias, whose skepticism had been shattered by the reality of the supernatural, at Father Ortiz, whose faith burned bright even in the face of such darkness. And she knew what she had to do. As Blackwood began to chant, drawing on the power of the thousands of souls trapped in the whirlpool below, Marina launched into action. She grabbed the artifacts they had brought, arranging them in the pattern described in the ancient journal. "Sarah, your blood!" she shouted. "Elias, the incantation! Father, we need your blessing!" Her team moved without hesitation, each playing their part in the desperate gambit. As Blackwood's power reached its zenith, Marina felt the deck of the Siren's revenge begin to splinter beneath her feet. "You're too late," Blackwood roared, the Abyss Heart pulsing with blinding intensity. Marina locked eyes with the undead captain. "No," she said quietly. "We're right on time." She plunged her hand into the glowing heart of the ritual circle. Pain beyond imagining coursed through her body as the power of the Abyss Heart and the thousands of souls it commanded poured into her. Blackwood's scream of rage was drowned out by a sound like the ocean itself crying out. The Siren's revenge began to disintegrate, its timbers turning to ash and scattering on the wind. Marina felt herself falling, the voices of 1,000 lost souls echoing in her mind. But there was no fear now, only a sense of rightness, of balance restored. As the last remnants of Blackwood's curse dissolved around them, Marina and her team found themselves floating in calm waters. In the distance they could see lights, a search and rescue operation. Is it over?" Elias asked, his voice shaky. Marina nodded, feeling the power of the Abyss Heart settling into a quiet corner of her soul. "Blackwood's reign is ended," she said. "The souls he trapped are free." "And the heart itself?" Father Ortiz asked. Marina managed a small smile. "Safe. Its power will be used to protect, not to destroy, to guide lost ships home, not lead them to their doom." As the rescue boats approached, Marina sent out a silent thank you to her father, and to all those who had suffered under Blackwood's curse. Their long nightmare was finally over. But she knew, as the weight of her new responsibility settled upon her, that her journey was only just beginning. In the years that followed, sailors would tell tales of a mysterious force that guided ships safely through storms, of a presence that calmed the fiercest waves. Some claimed to have seen a ghostly ship crewed by the redeemed souls of long-lost sailors, captained by a woman with eyes that glowed with an otherworldly light. And sometimes, on quiet nights when the mist rolled in, those at sea would hear a haunting melody carried on the wind, a song of redemption, of eternal voyages, and of the endless mysteries that lurk in the depths of the ocean. For the sea, like the human heart, holds darkness and light in equal measure, and sometimes it takes a brush with the supernatural to remind us of our own humanity.